I'm going to talk you through how to do some of the level 3 tasks that you have to do for the clauses assessment. So I'm going to kind of walk you through how to think through some of this stuff. First of all, identifying which type of dependent clause the sentence contains. They can be nouns, adjectives, or adverbs. And so the first thing you have to do is find a dependent clause. So to find a clause, you're going to look for subjects and verbs. So we're going to see the fact is, that's a subject and a verb. We're going to see he owns, subject and a verb. Then a dependent clause will always start with a connector word. So that connector word is going to be a relative pronoun, like who, which, that, whoever, whom, words like that. Question words like how, what, when, or subordinating conjunctions like because, if, whenever. So when we look at the fact is and that he owns the car, that is a connector word. So we're going to take this as the dependent clause. Then I got to figure out, is this a noun, adjective, or adverb? So the first thing I'm going to do is replace it with a pronoun. I'm going to go in this order: noun, adjective, adverb. The fact is something. Something is the fact. That is the fact. The fact is that. It works with a pronoun, so my answer is noun. I'm going to go on to number 2. I'm going to see I love, subject verb. I'm going to see diet can consist, subject verb. Then I'm going to look for a connector word. My diet cannot consist of it. My is not a connector word, although is a subordinating conjunction. So that is my dependent clause. I'm going to replace it with the pronoun it. My diet cannot consist of only it. It's not a noun. If it's an adjective, it will usually describe the noun that's right before it. There's no noun in front of it. So that means this is an adverb. Now, I can also check if it's an adverb. By this test, this is not a 100% test, it's a 90% test. But usually adverb clauses you can move around. My diet cannot consist of only it, although I love chocolate. Still makes sense even if you put it at the end, so it's an adverb. Number 3, they do know, and grammar is. So those are the subjects and verbs. They is not a connector word. Why is a question word, so that's a connector word. So I'm going to say they don't know it. That's a noun. I'm going to move down to 6. Students who take notes to remember grammar tricks do well on tests. So I'm going to say students. What do the students do? The students do. And then we also have this verb take. Who or what takes? Well, that's actually who take. So students do well on tests. What kind of students? Students who take notes to remember grammar tricks. This one's a little bit tricky. The reason it's tricky is your relative pronoun here is the subject, and it is also the connector word. So this is the dependent clause. Then I'm going to go through my tests. Is it a noun, adjective, or adverb? If it's a noun, I can replace it with a pronoun. Students, it do well on tests. No. Students, something do well on tests. No. If it's an adjective, it will describe the noun right in front of it. What kind of students? Students who take notes on grammar tricks. That is an adjective. So I'm going to put A, and I'll put a J. That's an adjective. So one other thing I want to say is these are dependent clauses, but there is one little tricky thing. If a dependent clause is a noun clause, your sentence won't make sense if you cut it out. So if you say the fact is, and then you cut this noun clause out, the sentence doesn't really make sense. So you don't want to look and say, well, the dependent clause is the one that you can take out of the sentence. That will usually be a good way to think about it, but not always. So the better way to think is that it starts with a connector word, like although, like that, like why, like who, and then it has a subject and a verb in it. Now in the other sections, for this part, they're all noun clauses. You have to tell me if it's a subject, a DO, a PN, an OP, and a positive, or an object of an infinitive. A subject is usually going to be in front of the verb. Everything else is going to have something in front of it. So I'm going to look at this sentence. That the ice cream cake tasted good surprised no one. Surprised is a verb, and tasted is a verb. What tasted? The ice cream cake tasted. So that's one subject and verb. And what surprised no one? Well, this is a little tricky. The whole clause, that the ice cream cake tasted good, that whole clause surprised no one. So that means that whole clause is the subject. In this next one, we already knew how cool clauses are. So we got a verb here, are, what are, clauses are. And then we've got knew, who knew, we knew. So I got to find a connector word. How is my connector word? I'm going to take that. And the subject is going to be in front of the verb. This is after a verb, so it's probably not the subject. A DO is going to have an active transitive verb in front of it. A PN is going to have a linking verb in front of it. An OP is going to have a preposition in front of it. And a positive is going to have a noun in front of it. And an object of an infinitive is going to have an infinitive in front of it. This has a verb in front of it. And new is not a linking verb. You can't put an equal sign here. It's an active transitive verb, so my answer is D, O, direct object. Then there also is this is actually level 4. If you end up doing the practice test, you might want to just review this. A simple sentence has one independent clause, but then it has 0 dependent clauses. A compound sentence, oops, I'm not going to make marks on this because they're messing up. Compound sentence has two or more independent clauses, but no dependent. Complex has one independent and one or more dependent. Compound complex has the attributes of compound and complex. So compound, it's 2 or more independent clauses, and complex, it is 1 or more dependent clauses. So you're going to go through and just find those subjects and verbs, look for connector words, recognize that compound and compound complex have to have more than one independent clause, which means they have to have a semicolon like this, or a comma with a fanboys word like this, comma and. Then if you have a comma and, look on both sides, make sure they're both independent clauses, find all the verbs, all the subjects, look for connector words. I hope that helps you understand how to recognize and label dependent and independent clauses.